They say if you close your eyes during the singing at Mamlaka Church on a Sunday morning, you can feel the air tremble, the congregation, all colors and voices, giving everything to a hymn older than the city. They say you can feel God. But that morning, kneeling near the altar, I didn't hear music. I heard the scrape of a chair against the concrete. I heard shoes shuffling, a cough. My hands stung from gripping the thin edge of the pew. My mother's voice broke through the hush with no softness. "You've disappointed us," she said. "Not just us, everyone here. This family, this church." I looked up. The whole front row watched, faces schooled blank, hands folded. Beyond them the rest of the hall, the aunties, the cousins, faces half-lit from the weak bulbs strung along the wall. The elders sat in a line like stones, Mzee Owino in the center, his walking stick crossed over elegant knees. "We raised you to do something useful," he said, his tone even, almost gentle. "Be a doctor, an engineer, not this." He gestured at the violin case beside my chair, like it was a dead fish. "Imagine playing that thing for a living," someone muttered. "Who does he think he is?" The words felt like raindrops, cold and sharp. I was 16. I tried to keep my shoulders straight, but the shame pressed down. My heart thudded, a bird trapped inside my chest. But I held my ground. "I want to be a musician," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "I want to play classical music, on stage, for people all over the world." At that, laughter broke out, nervous and mocking. My little cousin, Lucy, giggled before her mother nudged her to silence. My Uncle Solomon smirked behind his teeth. "Classical? You think you're Mozart?" He twisted my name, Samuel Sart, and a ripple of laughter moved through the hall. The church smelled of sweat and dust. Outside, the jacaranda trees dropped their purple blossoms on the hot pavement. Inside, the elders gave their verdict in silence. Soon enough, my father stood, hand on my shoulder, a touch cold with warning. "This is done," he said, more to end things than to comfort. When we walked home, I carried my violin case awkwardly, and their disappointment trailed behind me like a shadow. That night, in our small flat, my mother refused to look at me. I closed the bedroom door and lifted the instrument to my chin, bowing careful, secret scales while my brother snored on the upper bunk, music so quiet it sounded like apology. Our building overlooked the railway and the broken glass of disused factories. Every day, after school, I practiced in the stairwell where the acoustics were kind. My friends found it odd. They'd call to me from the dusty yard, kicking a soccer ball, mocking, "Oya, maestro, play us something real, like Diamond Platinums." They laughed not with malice, but with that heady, easy joy of boys who haven't learned fear yet. But I had. Day after day, my father's words echoed, "Not the violin again." My older brother Simon called me orchestra boy. Sometimes the neighbors listened. Sometimes they told me to quiet down. Sometimes I imagined the city listening, unseeing, as if the buildings themselves cared more than my flesh and blood. When I walked to school with my case, conductor's baton rubber-banded to the handle, I drew stares. Teachers told me plainly, "That won't get you anywhere in Kenya." They said it with careful, wounded pride, as though my refusal was personal. And sometimes, late at night, fear would crowd in. What if they were right? I survived secondary school in a haze of equations and dreams. Notes scribbled in the margins of textbooks, the violin waxed and tuned by lamplight. My bow arm grew stronger. The world narrowed to the gleaming sweep of gut strings and calluses pressed into my fingertips. My teacher, Mr. Kariuki, smiled at my dedication, but never promised anything. "They won't understand, Sam," he said once after an afternoon lesson in his bedsit, sweat trickling down from his collar. But music is not for them. It's for you. You play so your spirit won't die. I carried that with me. When the time came, I applied for scholarships, hundreds of them, quietly. Behind my parents' backs, pocket money spent on cyber cafe hours and postage instead of bus fare or chapati after school. Rejections came, one after another, small, neat slips. And then, one morning in July, an email subject blinked. Scholarship awarded. Royal Academy of Music, London. I read it 3 times before I understood. My hands shook with something like terror and joy. I ran to the city post office, printed the letter. I handed it to my parents, my mother's hands trembling beside her tea, my father silent except for the long trembling sigh. The family called a meeting. The church elders shook their heads, warning me of sinful, foreign callings. But for the first time, I didn't shrink away. At the airport, my sister pressed a card into my palm. Chase the music, Sammy. Don't lose yourself. It was the only blessing I carried. London, in winter, felt like living inside a cloud. The cold was not sharp, but endless. It rolled through my bones so deep, I sometimes dreamt of the sun on my back and the chirr of cicadas. My accent marked me, and so did my poverty, students fresh from conservatories in Vienna and Seoul, whose hands wore the polish of privileged training. I worked mornings in a bakery, afternoons in a copy shop. I practiced at dawn and after midnight, fingers bleeding. Often, I remembered that first shaming back home, the eyes on me, afraid and mocking. The memory grew heavy, became a companion. Still, music was water. There was power in the bow, in a phrase played just right, a secret strength, tenderness and steel. I played in the cracked practice rooms, in leaky cafes, in subway tunnels where coins pinged against the violin case. I was happy and lonely, sometimes full of doubt, sometimes electric with hope. Every so often, during the second movement of a Shostakovich sonata, the city's ache dropped away and it felt like home. After years of hunger and effort, after exam horrors and recitals where no one clapped, something shifted. I was invited to join a chamber orchestra, the Marston Ensemble, a small group, but they had a season at Wigmore Hall. The first night, standing in the wings in a rented tuxedo, I remembered the church lights in Nairobi, the weight of my mother's hand, her refusal to meet my gaze. My knees shook, but my bow arm did not. The concert sold out. Someone from the BBC wrote a review. A rare, tender fire. Watch this one. Other players began to notice. Invitations to solo. Newspaper features. Once, a woman pressed my hand and whispered, "I saw myself in your music. Thank you." It was success, gradual, unshowy, and hard-earned. My name traveled back to Nairobi long before my body did. Years passed, a blur of apartments and cold winters. Music drifting under doors. Friendships flaring and fading. Still, I missed home. I missed Ugali beside the railway slum, my brother's laughter, the jacaranda blossoms messily carpeting the earth. I kept my family's WhatsApp group on mute, but sometimes I'd scroll through, reading my sister's messages, my aunt's chained prayers for prosperity, my mother's silence. One day, the Nairobi Symphony invited me. Maestro Samuel Otieno, would you return home to headline our Jubilee concert? The ink on the letter was rich and blue. The invitation impossible to refuse. I booked my one-way ticket. For weeks I slept little, nerves buzzing. What would I find? Would anyone care? The city was the same as memory and utterly new. At Jomo Kenyatta Airport, the air staggered me. Diesel and dust, roasted maize, the call of hawkers. My father picked me up in a taxi, awkward. He'd lost weight, his beard flecked silver. We drove past the stadiums and new office blocks. My old school, memories tugging at every turn. At home, my siblings poured tea, laughter filling the cramped kitchen. No one mentioned the old shame. My mother watched every move as though I was a ghost returned. In my old room, my violin case lay beside the bed, waiting for evening practice. The morning of the concert, I woke before dawn. By 7, I walked through the bright roads, past school children in blue sweaters, past the chapati ladies' carts, the street preachers with their battered microphones and Bibles. Everyone's eyes seemed fixed straight ahead, unmoved by the prodigal's return. Back at Mamlaka Church, preparations buzzed. The choir rehearsed in the vestry. The air was thick with nervousness and cut flowers. When I stepped onto the stage for practice, Mzee Owino drifted in, cane tapping. He paused as I tuned my violin. His eyes, sharp and watery, fanged mine. "You really made something of this noise," he said, not unkindly. I smiled, bowing my head. "It kept me alive," I said. That night, the hall filled to the rafters.